Let's get started. Good morning, everybody. I see that we have still participants joining us, but we'll still get started. I like to be on time, even if it is a digital webinar. So welcome to this webinar on ecosystems, a philosophical pastime or a real value driver. Now, this webinar is organized by Dynamic Integrations, represented by my co-host, Fredrik de Vries, and Network Development Hub, represented by myself. We are doing this as a part of Oslo Innovation Week, so thank you also to Oslo Innovation Week for letting us be a part of this. We have put together a really cool set of speakers and panelists. We are actually ranging from Uganda to Silicon Valley and from mechanical engineering to philosophy. So this is going to be a really cool morning seminar. The purpose of this seminar is to talk about what is a business ecosystem and why do they matter? And then how to make these ecosystems actually work, how to make them a success, because there are many ways of making sure it doesn't work as well. Our ambitions here are to give our audience some real practical input that you can go and execute on, well, today, and hopefully also some new food for thought. So, Fredrik, I know that you also have quite a few thoughts on what an ecosystem is. So now in the digital world, we just literally just going to slide in and out.
Thank you, Eileen. Good morning, everyone. Ecosystems, yes. As Eileen mentioned, I have the mechanical background because we're going through a number of revolutions, industrial revolutions. And we have to bear in mind that the ecosystems we see emerging today are operating within a bigger scope. And the scope is the society. The society is providing us with infrastructure, with electricity, with buildings, which make it possible that ecosystems can function. However, there are even more developments going on. One of our companies we work with, they make data centers which can be placed in cities, in regions, and they use the energy, the waste energy, normally, to cool down these data centers. They reuse that to heat up water. And they've nearly come to the level of 100 degrees. And if water goes to 100 degrees, you can create steam. And from steam, you can make electricity. And then you have two systems which go together. That's the data. And we're going to the digital future. So the data use will increase of energy. So you generate more electricity. And this makes it possible to create an ecosystem by itself, independent from the state. And our question is, our interest is, to which extent have governments, nation states, looked at this potential development? So we looked at several nations, and we came across the Dutch government, the Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment, who wrote a paper about ecosystems. And they interviewed a lot of people from private and business and also the government themselves about ecosystems, what it is, how they use it. And they created also a website, which is called digicampus.tech, which can be visited, and they invite private, public, entrepreneurs, science to solve social questions, social issues, where people can work together and deliver something to the public. The other nation which is very advanced in creating a digital society is the United Arab Emirates. They have put digitalization of the nation on the agenda nationwide. So they have, for example, a minister of artificial intelligence, and they have a lot of initiatives through a wide scope delivering solutions to their citizens to make life living in a country as easy as possible. This endeavor, the United Arab Emirates embarked on, is written in a really nice, compact book called Digital Nation. And it's a really nice description of all the initiatives they took, with some interviews, what people encounter, how they move forward. And I can recommend both the book, Digital Nation, from the United Arab Emirates, and the digicampus.tech, if you want to have a view how governments trying to embrace, deal with the emergence of ecosystems. So it's very interesting to see how governments in other countries look at this development, if they acknowledge it, and how they will handle it. Thank you, Eileen.
Right, so we do the analog change again. So before we get started with the first keynote, let's just go through a few housekeeping details. So for our audience, please stay muted, both sound and video. That will make things easier to perform from our side. And please use the chat to ask questions during the keynotes. We are going to let the keynotes speak for about 15 minutes. And after that, we'll do about 5 minutes of Q&A. And my colleague Frederick here will help me monitor what kind of questions we are getting from our audience. And then I will ask these questions, or at least a few of them, to the keynotes. We will also maybe save some of these questions for the panel discussion that will follow. No presentations will be sent out afterwards, but this webinar will be recorded and available online. Right, so we have some really cool keynotes today. And let's move on to the first one, Christian. Now, I'll make sure that Christian can take over my screen. So Christian, he was an innovative tech entrepreneur for about 15 years until he discovered the DNA of disruptive innovation. And then he decided to rather use that to predict the next big wave of technological disruption. He is now an international keynote speaker and futurist on disruptive technologies. And he's also an author of the best-selling book, Humanification. So Christian, please take it away.
Thank you, Eileen, for this nice introduction. I hope everyone by now can see my screen, which I'm sharing. In my talk, I want to give you a more evolutionary or more holistic perspective on ecosystems. So let's join me on a small trip to the future of ecosystems. In the early days, human beings lived in a stable and predictable world. The world we lived in was not bigger than the eye could see, or not bigger than our feet can bring us. And change happened very, very slowly. Sometimes it took many generations for small changes to take effect. And that was okay. We lived in a stable and predictable world. But today, we live in a completely different world. We live in a world that is highly connected with smart technology. And we live in a world that is changing exponentially fast. So it doesn't take generations to take effect. Now change only takes years, months, and sometimes weeks to take effect. And change is going faster and faster and faster. We see the emergence of multiple exponential technologies, and together they enable a completely new economy. So sorry, that's my Siri technology. So if you would ask me as a futurist how the next 5 to 10 years might look like, then this picture, I think, represents that answer. I believe that we will see a massive disruption in the next decade, a massive wave, a tsunami, a tidal wave of technological disruption, of change. And for a lot of people, this is quite scary. So if you're in your boat and you look out of your porthole and you see this wave coming at you, then you feel a little bit stressed, I think. But there are also a different kind of people, a different kind of organizations. And they see the same wave, but they see it from a different perspective. They see it as an opportunity instead of a threat. And I'm talking about the disruptive companies that we see all around us today. Companies that use technology and that use change to grow exponentially fast and to increase their amount of customers on a yearly basis. So Digital disruption is basically all about human empowerment. It's about growing ecosystems that enable the individual, but also startups, to grow exponentially fast. We also see that disruption behaves like a chain reaction. So it starts somewhere in Silicon Valley, or in China, or in Oslo, for example, or in the Netherlands, and then it travels very fast to different and other industries. So if you wait until your neighbor is on fire, then you're way too late. So if you see something happening in the industry, a disruption, then you have to look for yourself, how can we use this technology and to make it beneficial for our own company, our own progress. And we will also see disruption in every major industry. So it's not only in the tech industry, but also in the traditional automotive industry, for example. So Tesla, for example, and many other Chinese manufacturers are working on autonomous cars. And for example, if you put a human being behind the steering wheel, it makes an accident one every 100,000 kilometers. But an AI algorithm is only making an accident in 1 in 10 million kilometers. And that's out of the first Waymo test from Google. So that means a 99% reduction in the amount of accidents, car accidents. So if you're in the car insurance company business, then you have a problem. Or if you are in the body workshop business, then you have a problem. So it's affecting many, many industries. So we can start to ask ourselves, well, if it's going that fast, can we even predict what's next? Can we predict the next big wave of change, the next big wave of technological disruption? I believe we can. A couple of years ago, I made a profound discovery, and this discovery completely changed the way of how I see the world. And basically, in 2001, my daughter Nika was born, or 2011, sorry. And after 3 months, we discovered she had some severe health problems, health issues. So we went to hospital, and basically we find out that she needs heart surgery right away. So she went into surgery, but everything that could go wrong went wrong. Her body was not responding to the medical procedures and medication. And basically, after the operation, they told us that the cause of her health issues was a genetic disorder, which was so rare, there were no other people known in the world. So she got a terminal diagnosis, and they couldn't help her any further. So I started to do my own research. And during that research, I started to look in a completely different way towards health and towards the human body. Because if you look closer to the human body, then the human body is a community and society of cells working together, collaborating on a massive scale. And cells have many things in common with human beings. For example, a cell can be in 2 extreme states, just like human beings can. On one state, it's in the stress state, and there it reduces its communication with the environment, and all kinds of things start to go wrong as a result. But if a cell is in a relaxed or a thriving mode, it starts to exchange more information with the environment. It starts to become creative. It starts to become innovative, and it can solve much bigger problems. And this is basically the self-healing ability of the body, and this is also available within organizations. So these insights eventually helped us to save our daughter's life. She's now almost 10 years old, and she's doing great. But with my technology background, I start to see more parallels between cells and humans, and parallels between biology and technology, and parallels between organizations and organisms. So if you look closer to how cells evolved and how they created ecosystems, then we can learn a lot from them. Just like humans, cells are social, and they communicate, and they start communities. And when these communities become bigger, they start to encounter practical problems, and they need to solve those problems in order to go to the next stage. So what I did, my research focused on the last 1 billion years, and I looked how cells in biological systems evolved, how these ecosystems evolved into organisms like human beings. And what I discovered is that there are 7 big waves, 7 big disruptive waves, which are basically S-curves. And each wave results in a new kingdom of species. And basically, I have named these waves in the specific order. Interaction is the first wave, infrastructure the next wave, information is the third wave, the fourth wave is about instinct, the fifth wave about imitation, the sixth wave about intelligence, and the seventh wave about imagination. So let's dive deeper into this wave so that we can understand how our technology is evolving. Because basically, biology is the blueprint for technology. The first wave is all about interaction. Cells start to communicate with each other, start to exchange information, and start to collaborate, which help them to survive. and to grow bigger and much more solid. So they start to create coral. It's a bone-like structure, basically the prototype of our bones. And it helped them to gather food from the environment and to stay safe. The second big wave was about infrastructure. Organisms start to develop a vascular system, a digestive system, to provide food and nutrition for all these cells within the community. The third wave was all about information. So organisms start to develop a nervous system and senses that help them to survive even better in a hostile environment. The fourth wave was about instinct. There was so much information flowing over that they start to develop a reptile brain. And this reptile brain automated all the internal processes like a microprocessor or an operating system. The fifth wave was all about imagination, or the limbic brain, the social brain, or the mammal brain. And this brain helped organizations or organisms to recognize counterparts and like-kinded organisms. And it helped them also to analyze behavior of other animals. And it helped them to recognize other animals so they can start to live in tribes, in herdles. And they become more social. The sixth wave is all about intelligence. So the neocortex brain helped organisms to stand up straight and learn and adapt in real time, but also solve problems, make fire, and create tools. And the last biological upgrade is all about imagination. It's the prefrontal cortex. And this helps organisms to develop language, concepts, and visualize things. So basically what happened is that from cells to sapiens, we moved through 7 stages. And what we see now is that human beings, Homo sapiens, are the final result of this 7-wave process. And we think, and I think a lot of the scientists think, that evolution stopped here. But I think evolution continued, but on a much higher scale and a much higher phase. Because if you go to the next 7 stages, we see from sapiens to society that we are again moving to the 7 same stages, the 7 waves. Let me dive deeper into this wave so that you can understand them. The first technological wave is about the agricultural revolution. We start to communicate, develop communication skills, and we start to build communities. And on the right bottom of the screen, you see how cells solve this problem. And in the middle of the screen, you see how human beings solve this problem. So we build stone structures that keep us safe from the environment, and we start to filter fruit from the environment using agriculture technology. The second big wave, technological wave, was about infrastructure. So in the 1700s, we start to develop large industries and railroads and oil pipelines and eventually the energy grid that we have today. And what you see here is Berlin by night. It's the vascular system of a city. And in the bottom right, we see the vascular system of an organism. When we developed electricity, we entered the next wave, the third wave, which was all about information, the telecom revolution. Basically, this is the nervous system of our society, the nervous system of large organizations. And it helped us to share information over large distances via the telegraph, the radio, and the telephone, and finally television and the internet. And we also start to develop senses, like the microphone and the camera, to become more aware of our environment and to increase our survival rate. The fourth wave was all about instinct. Around the 1950s, 1960s, there was so much information flowing over these nervous systems, these telecom systems, that companies like IBM started to develop automation, like microchips and operating systems. And finally, the fifth wave, which took, I think, the last 20 years, the social media revolution, the introduction of the internet. We start to upload all kinds of information. We start to build some kind of limbic brain, which helps us to analyze and social behavior, but also to learn from other people and to connect with other people. And we start to live in communities, online communities. And now we enter the sixth wave. It's all about intelligence. And I'm talking about artificial intelligence in the cloud, which will help organizations to learn and adapt in real time and to solve much bigger problems. And the final wave of our human evolution will be the seventh wave, which is about holographic technology. And this will help us to develop one visual language and to understand much more complex concepts and to visualize things using holographic technology like augmented reality, extended reality, and the spatial web, for example. So basically what we see here is that human beings go through the same waves as cells. But now it's not about cells use biology to build organisms, it's about sapiens using technology to build organizations. And basically what we are doing here is building ecosystems. And each ecosystem is a launching platform for the next ecosystem. So ecosystems are evolutionary, from an evolutionary perspective, very important. Without ecosystems, we cannot thrive, we cannot evolve as a species. And evolution is driven by mistakes, not by plans. So we see very advanced technology used in the wrong way. And I think this is, again, an evolutionary process. We will learn from this and we will improve our products and make it more purposeful. So human beings always do the most intelligent thing after they've tried every stupid alternative. And none of them have worked, a quote of Richard Buckminster Fuller. So this pattern is not only available or present between biology and technology, but it's happening on every level of our universe. Organisms and organizations are built from organisms. It's an ecosystem of organisms. Organisms are built from an ecosystem of cells. Cells are built from an ecosystem of molecules. Molecules is an ecosystem of atoms, and atoms is an ecosystem of particles. And again, particles are an ecosystem of quantum waves. And we see this also in music, for example. So it's like a keyboard, and each octave, the eighth note of each octave is the first note of the next octave. So since the beginning of time and space, we see that nature is all about building ecosystems. And ecosystems are the launching platforms for the next wave of evolution. And one guy, Arthur M. Young, is still is not here anymore because he died a couple of years ago, but he did a lot of research. And what he also found out is that these 7 steps are repeating themselves on each of these levels. So on a quantum level, on a particle level, on an atomic level, on a molecular level, on a cellular level, on an organism level, and again on an organizational level. So why do we need ecosystems? Well, ecosystems help us to fulfill specific needs. And what we see here is the hierarchical pyramid of Maslow, Abraham Maslow. It's about the human needs. And the bottom layer is about our psychological needs, like hunger, thirst, fire, and survival. And the top layer is about self-actualization, finding one's purpose and fulfill that purpose. And basically what technology is doing, it's building ecosystems and it's automating each need or behavior that we have. So technology is creating ecosystems that help us to go upwards in this pyramid, to fulfill higher needs, higher human needs. So ecosystems are, I think, very important in this process. We cannot without them. And we are moving to a new era. In the early days, it was about efficiency needs, about the self, fragmentation, competition, dependent. And now we are moving to a new era, which is all about relations, about synergy, collaboration, and being independent. And being independent can only be done if you are empowered by an ecosystem. And to give you an example of these ecosystems, how they can empower small startups. We all know Lyft or Uber, the biggest taxi companies without owning any taxis. And they can only do this because they leverage all the other ecosystems that's already there. On a communication level, interaction level, there are people who want to go from A to B. There is a law. There are taxi drivers. On an infrastructure level, there are roads. There's energy. There's mobility. On the information level, there are GPS sensors. There's wireless networks. And there are information processing devices like your smartphone. On a software level, there are apps, app stores, operating systems. And finally, on a social level, there are big data, analytics, and there are social media platforms. And based on all these ecosystems, companies like Uber and Lyft can grow exponentially fast. And perhaps they don't have the right intentions right now, but I think in the future they will solve that. But what I will show here is that these ecosystems help us to go to the next stage. And this will only go in a higher level, in a higher pace in the next 10 years. I believe that every human need will be automated and will be a commodity. So it will be widely available and very cheap. So we will have products as a service. We will have infrastructures as a service. We will have information as a service. We will have software as a service. And now we are entering the era of platforms as a service. And we see this everywhere. Amazon is a big example of this. And now we are entering the next stage where we can have intelligence as a service. So we will see intelligent ecosystems that can provide intelligence using AI in the cloud. And finally, we will have almost everything as a service. So basically, this is more my perspective on ecosystems. It's an evolutionary, holistic perspective. And I wrote a book about this. So if you want to know more about it, you can download it for free. So if you scan this QR code, it will send to you for free, and you can read more about it. So this was my keynote. I hope you enjoyed it and give you some extra insights and a more holistic perspective on the need for ecosystems. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Christian. And it's a pity you cannot hear us laughing when you are doing a digital webinar, because we were indeed laughing a bit on the picture of the matches. So I'm telling you, we really enjoyed it. And thank you very much for sharing your very personal story about your daughter.
Thank you.
Of course, I have a couple of questions. You said you predict a tsunami of technical disruption. How do you think we should make sure that we get all the people on board on this? Because to us, well, we are used to working in a technical world. It might be a bit easier for us, but what about all the others that are not that technical by nature?
Yeah, my opinion is, I think, the opposite of many of the other futurists. I believe the technology will become more accessible. It will become more human. We already have a smartphone in our pocket, and a smartphone enabled with speech technology using artificial intelligence will make this technology available for everyone who can speak. So elderly people, disabled people, people without having education can speak to the most advanced systems that we have and the most advanced knowledge that we have. So I think more and more people will come on board. And that's why you see that these waves are doubling or they are reduced in the length exponentially, but they double in impact. That's why I believe that we will see a wide adoption of technology, even wider than it is today, when AI will become available as a natural dialogue interface for technology. And eventually, if we have virtual or augmented technology, which will create holograms in our real world, like the spatial web or extended reality, there are no restrictions anymore. Everyone can interact with all the knowledge and all the power that we have online. So I think many more people will come on board. So I see it as an opposite thing.
In the chats coming in, you are getting some really nice feedback, Christian, on your presentation. It's really nice. Now, there's one question that I think is really worth asking about, and that is, what's the difference between a platform and an ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a platform is more a technical term for something that you can use. I think an ecosystem is much more complex. It's about ecology. It's about a complete living system. So I see a platform as something as a solid software thing, and an ecosystem is a living environment which adapts constantly to each other. So I see it as a living entity instead of a fixed thing. I think a platform is a fixed thing, like a solid concrete thing or a software platform. But an ecosystem, it's alive. It's thriving. It's growing, and it's adapting constantly. Just like in nature, all the animals and all the plants have to adapt to each other to survive. And I think in an ecosystem, that's the most important thing: to stay relevant and to adapt in a constant rate.
Now, Christian, I just need to read this comment aloud. So it says, in my 20 years of career being a part of the technological ecosystem, this is the first time I've ever seen someone describing the evolution of ecosystems. Well done, Christian.
You're welcome.
So I know that Christian will be very happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn and, of course, read his book, The Commercial of the Day. And I hope that we will get more chances to listen to your very insightful perspectives, Christian.
You're welcome.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, and with that, I would like to introduce our next keynote. That is Jennifer Wessels. She's from Silicon Valley, currently stuck in Oslo thanks to COVID. She's the founder of Executive Growth Alliance, which is a global ecosystem of open-minded, committed, brave leaders collaborating to creating a better future. She has also founded a couple of companies in Silicon Valley, and she's led growth and transformation for global brands that we all should recognize, like Tandberg, Google, and Adobe. Jennifer calls herself a future-ready innovator. So, Jennifer, I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on ecosystems from a business perspective.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here. And I will say I completely agree with everything Christian said, that ecosystems are organisms. And I use that term from the point of view of business organisms, humans that work together, leveraging platforms, which may be technology, maybe other elements such as locations and industries working together to create a better future. And in fact, Silicon Valley is an ecosystem. And when I say it's an ecosystem, I mean that it is made up of a lot of different organisms and a lot of different types of cells and people and companies that are committed to a common goal. And in my terms of an ecosystem that delivers business results and that really drives change in the current environment in which we're working, I define an ecosystem as a group. And it could be a group of companies, it could be a group of people, it could be a group of perspectives that have some commonality and they work together in order to achieve their individual goals, but their collective goals. And that really is the way Silicon Valley has evolved. In Silicon Valley, we have lots of great education centers, such as Stanford, such as Berkeley, that help people build the platform of skills and knowledge on how to innovate. But we also have a lot of open, committed, brave people that go through those universities that move into Silicon Valley from all around the world, from other schools, other perspectives, that are the real innovators with that commitment to drive change, build their companies, supported by equally important open, brave people that are in services arenas, by people that are the early adopters that want to use the technology, that want to embrace the future, supported by media getting the message out about them, as well as the investors and the infrastructure to help them grow. That builds those innovators, individuals, supported by a lot of other factors and perspectives, helps them grow into large tech companies. As they grow into large companies, those companies spin off new innovations, people have new ideas, companies get purchased, and they go on to create the next generation. That was the core of Silicon Valley back between the 1960s, when the Shockley Labs Fairchild became the first semiconductor ecosystem that has now spawned what we have today with Google, with Facebook, with Uber, continuing the iterations and the growth of those ecosystems organically. That's not reserved specifically for Silicon Valley. That kind of ecosystem thinking, how can we bring people together to collaborate, share, work for a common goal, that can be done anywhere. We see that in America in places like Austin, Texas. We see that in Berlin. I've seen that grow, and I'm very pleased to say I've seen it really develop here in Oslo, where innovators coming out of oil and gas have applied their capabilities and their contacts and relationships to other areas of environment, fish farming, etc. In my legacy of building international business for Tandberg, very pleased to see that same approach as we have Video Valley now in Oslo with the Tandberg Cubs that are going out and building the next innovations. So ecosystems apply very much to business with common perspectives. Within the Executive Growth Alliance, we actually bring people together in ecosystems, smaller ecosystems, built around common goals within either an industry or a common systemic challenge. For example, in EGA, there are groups working around reinventing transportation, reshaping mobility. And when we think about mobility, in the big scheme of things, mobility is all about an individual, a person, needing to get from point A to point B. And in an EGA group, we can bring in, as we have done, members such as Norwegian Air, Avinor, Train Communication Systems in Central Europe, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, parking organizations, and public sector folks that are looking at what are the real long-term perspectives of what is needed for true data sharing, true collaboration, and true long-term commitment to working together. Through this ecosystem approach of solving systemic change, we have seen some very tangible results of 2, 3 of these very different, very large organizations working together collaboratively, under the radar and unofficially, to try things out, designing solutions and actually launching them in a pilot in less than 9 months. Unheard of in the official way of doing things, but through a ecosystem of people working together and connecting, it is possible. We have seen also a number of long-term collaborations around things such as how can we really drive change in the environment, reducing plastics in the world's oceans. And very importantly today, rethinking healthcare, all the way from the genetic research that's being done to pharmaceuticals, to patient care, structure of hospitals, insurance and payment systems, all of which organizations and business leaders have recognized a need to change. By coming together, sharing openly, they are starting to make those changes as they co-create future success. This doesn't happen randomly. It can in a coffee shop as you talk to people, but for the real change and real business results and real value, you need a structure. And that's what we do in the Executive Growth Alliance. We use a decades-long proven methodology called Power of Peers, bringing communities together with a shared purpose. And keys to success in these communities working together is identifying the right peers, the right players around the table. What are all of those elements that need to really come to the table to rethink transportation or something like healthcare? But keeping it small, because in a peer collaboration ecosystem, you need 6 to 12, maybe 14 at most people that can really build trust, share openly with each other, and connect to drive real action and change. So in EGA, we curate these groups based on shared challenges, based on commitment, common commitment from each of the members, and by that I mean person as well as company, to be that open, committed, brave person to really drive change and share openly. Because we need to bring people with diverse perspectives to challenge, to share experience, and most importantly, to be ready and willing to take action. People that work openly and committed in ecosystems gain future readiness, meaning they have different ideas and perspectives. They're not hiding under a rock, waiting to see what happens next. They have confidence because others in their environment with similar challenges but different perspectives have their back. And ultimately, by working together and having a commitment and accountability to take action, they actually move their business forward. That's how 2 large companies can work together in 9 months and co-create an app to drive change in an area like transportation. We do it in EGA on a platform called Circles, which is a purpose-built platform specifically for peer collaboration and learning. This allows us to bring global views to these big questions so that we can have people in Amsterdam, someone in South Africa, someone in Mexico, representatives in Silicon Valley, in Asia, all working together on these problems. Because the more sharing that we can do of our strengths, our capabilities, and our perspectives globally on systemic issues, the greater our opportunity to really drive change. In an executive growth circle, we have one member that brings a SOC or a case into each circle, and we collaborate to help them solve that case by curating the members so that each have similar challenges, all walk out with committed actions to move forward and ultimately move the full group forward. So ecosystems are important, they're critical, and I believe in our evolution into the new world of imagination and AI and what the future brings. I believe by working together collaboratively in small groups, open commitment, with structure, we can all be part of building that future that we're looking at, which will be very different than our past. So I would welcome anyone that is interested in more information to reach out to me, and happy to share more examples, and also happy to support you as you build your own formal or informal ecosystems, because ultimately by working together, we can all build a better society as well as greater benefits for our organizations and ourselves.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. It's always interesting to listen to your perspectives on peer-to-peer collaboration. And then, of course, I have a question for you as well. So, based on the experience you have from Executive Growth Alliance and the peer-to-peer sharing, what would be your one or two main advice for any company that would like to strengthen their internal work with ecosystems, meaning working across the silos to a large extent? What would your two advice be?
The first thing is to develop. You have to what you're trying to do in order to be successful. So be clear of what you want that ecosystem to achieve, and be very selective of who should be in the ecosystem and who is invited to work closely on that goal, and have a structure. Have a structure of how often that ecosystem touches base, what is the level of accountability of people to take action and to actually work in the ecosystem, and manage it carefully. So start with the right people, common goal, and a structure.
Okay. Questions. So here. So when you create an ecosystem, how do you make every participant that is part of this benefit from the ecosystem and to perceive an added value of being part of it?
Mm-hmm. It starts with having a shared goal. So by coming in with a purpose, that you want to solve problems, you want to create new opportunities, and in the methodology of our executive growth circles, we structure where every circle starts with, what have you done and what have you learned? Now let's work together on the next challenge, and everyone leaves with committed action that relates to their purpose, their challenge, and their opportunity.
There's one more question here I'd like to ask you, actually. So how do ecosystems like Executive Growth Alliance or any other ecosystem between companies handle companies that want to collaborate, but at the same time might actually be competitors in some instances?
It's a great question. We in Silicon Valley, we have something we call cooperation, because ultimately, if you bubble it up to wallet share and budget, we're all competing. But when it really comes down to what are we actually doing and how can we build a better, bigger pie, we all need to work together. So, for example, in the transportation group in EGA, somewhere a year ago, and now we have an airport, we have an airline, we have a bus company, we have a train company. One could say, there's some competition there. Does the traveler take the train or the bus or the plane? And about a year ago, one of the members had just an amazing aha moment when he said, hang on a second. For the last 6 months, I realized for myself, I've been holding back a little bit in how much I share, because I've been thinking the old way, that I'm competing with you guys. And he says, I've just had the realization. Now, this was before the pandemic. I've just had the realization. We are not competing with each other. We're competing with Zoom. Because if we don't make that traveler's journey seamless and we don't make it easy for that person to go from Drammen to Munich for his meeting, he's not going to go. So we can stay in our little silos and believe that the bus and the airline and the train and the car are competing, or we can break those down and build a better journey so that they actually want to use one of us. It may be me today, it may be you tomorrow, but they're using one of us. Otherwise, we're going to be disrupted.
Now, that's an interesting perspective. We're not competing against each other. We're competing against Zoom. I learned a new word today, corporatician. Note made. Jennifer, thank you very much for now, but we'll get you back online in a few minutes. So see you around very soon. So, Sander, now you're next out. And, Sander van der Blonk, he has about 2 decades of experience as a technology entrepreneur. He has experienced and learned from successes and failures. And I think this is really interesting to learn from people that have actually experienced not just success. He started his career in marketing and innovation in the biotech and software industries. And now he specializes in co-innovation at Cumulus Park, which is the innovation cluster founded by the Dutch bank ING. Sander, all yours.
Thank you. I hope this is viewable. Thank you, Ellen, for your kind words. Hello, everybody. From Amsterdam, live. It's a pity we can't meet in real, but hopefully next time better. And what I like to do is I like to dive straight in and build upon the presentation that Christian gave and also some of the thoughts that Jennifer aired. And maybe I would like to take also kind of or bring kind of a sobering thought or a practical thought to making ecosystems work. And I would like to talk about this idea, this notion of alignment, because whether you work with customers, suppliers, competitors, as we learned, or startups, or the government and public organizations, the fact is that what we call expectation alignment is the often overlooked step. And what do I mean by this? Well, I take a kind of let's say another approach to ecosystems. I see ecosystems like a stock of potential partners, so you like. And as you know, stock should move. So ecosystem management to me is the efficacy in forging collaborations. I think that's also what Jennifer just told us. So we want to see activity. Otherwise, you're simply that meet. It doesn't work. And let me put it bluntly, an ecosystem is all about working together. It's not about talking, it's about doing things. And we know that's not something which happens overnight. It takes some preparation. So if it's true that collaboration is critical for success within an ecosystem, it also means that most likely you have to work together with people you haven't worked with before. That's on the one side, that's the beauty of it, because you will meet peers, as Jennifer said, you meet companies, you meet people with new ideas, but there's also something new to it, and this newness might scare you off, and I come back to that in a second. So collaborations, they take many forms and shapes, or sometimes we call this engagement formats. They might be many-to-many, they might be one-to-many, they might be one-to-one, they might be cooperative, they might be competitive, but actually it is people and companies working together. So what I like to do for the remainder of the session is to focus on a particular kind of collaboration, which I call co-creation or co-innovation. But the objective really is to develop something new. It can be adjacent to what you currently do, but it can also be completely new, building upon insights from other industries to find new solutions. The fact is, sadly, the fact is that 50 to 55% of collaborations stall, fail, don't take off, whatever you would like to call this, due to misalignment. And it's not only a waste of time and money and maybe bruised reputations, it's mostly avoidable. Not always, but it's mostly avoidable. And the reason is that collaboration, although we talk companies, in essence, collaboration is between people or among people. And for some of this, it's pretty new. You know, we don't all magically get along with each other, and we hug and we love each other at a blink of an eye. An idea of a collaboration might lead for some people to become worried, maybe about their own job, the job security. Or they become overwhelmed, or they have tremendous joy in doing this. So it comes with all kinds of emotions, and you have to address this. And the fact is that to our knowledge, and also based on research, and also what we see at Cumulus Spark, is that companies all too often jump straight into the doing. Even at the executive level, the executives say, well, the moment we see a kind of a strategic fit, then the operations will follow immediately. And some of these executives, they want to have a kind of a deal and ink the deal and say, listen, we've got this deal, we're going to work together. But we know in practice, it doesn't work that easily. You have to spend the time to prepare for the content of the collaboration. So also building up on what Jennifer said, the whole name of the game is creating trust and ensuring that people align, literally align. So from our experience, there are at least 3 aspects that need further consideration. You need to flesh these out. The first aspect that you need to flesh out is there a common objective and a real mutual need between collaborating partners? You might have a common objective, but it doesn't mean that you also have a mutual need. And then will it click? Can these collaborating partners, even if you're not in a competitive situation, but can you put your competitive instinct aside? I mean, we are real human beings. I mean, it's always a little bit looking at each other, and is there a real bonding tissue here? The second aspect, which needs to be considered, is the real scope of the collaboration. Are you all aligned in terms of the problem domain and the solution approach? Is it your intention to build something from the ground up, or can you leverage existing solutions that are already out there, and maybe the solution from one of the collaborating partners? And the third aspect, and this is a very tricky one, and I will come back to this in a sec, will partners equally contribute to making it happen? Will they share the risk and reward? Only then we believe you have a collaboration of equals. So you have to touch upon the instrumental, the rational aspect. You have to touch upon the love. And obviously you will touch upon legal stuff business stuff, and to give it a bit more flesh, you will deal with the sexy, but also the non-sexy stuff. Aspects as where will we work? How do we make decisions? Who takes decisions? Do we do the 50-50 basis? How do we measure as to whether a collaboration yields results, and not particularly geared towards the collaboration intent, but also in the way we collaborating partners work, and are we still in alignment, literally, with what we originally conceived of? How do we deal with conflicts if we don't agree, if we don't like the stuff that we're doing? Do we have a grand plan of schemes? What do we see as an exit potentially? And last but not least, a very important topic is data. GDPR rules, Europe. How do we govern the data? How do we agree who has got access to the data and who doesn't get the access? Taxonomies, all these kind of stuff need attention, and we believe, before actually starting the collaboration. So to sum it up, it's about communications. Open up, explain to each other, get your standpoint, make the implicit explicit. And at Cumulus Park, we use processes for this. We have lots of tools, but we also have a couple of guiding principles. And let me give you 3 guiding principles. Let me say the juicy stuff, where the shit hits the fan sometimes. One is the reciprocity. If one party commits to bringing in a particular set of resources, the other party must be committed to reciprocate, to do the same. So the question is, what if it doesn't work? What if the one party brings more to the table than the other party can commit to? How do you deal with this? You better discuss this up front. Another aspect is, and it's so simple if you see it on paper, but in reality it's difficult. We believe it's work as equals. So we also guide collaborations between established companies and startups. Well, there is asymmetry baked into the collaboration. What do? How do you conceive this idea? Is that big company, small company, it doesn't matter. You work together as equals. You have to talk about this and build rapport. Third point, so simple, but let me tell you in practice, it's not the way it works. There never is honesty. We would love to have honesty. We would love that people speak up what their hidden agenda is. Why are they doing this? What is the collaboration doing for them? The people actually in the teams. Be open up front, but it doesn't work always that way, I must say. So it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act between the individual and the collective interests and benefits. And eventually, it's a process that needs to grow from what's in it for me to what's in it for what we call the we. So let me sum it up, given the short time that we have available. As said, I believe that there's a lot of activity going on in forming ecosystems, in bonding, in joining discussions, virtually or real, in meeting people. But the challenge is not in building these ecosystems. I believe, or we believe at Cumulus Park, the challenge is in making collaboration happen. So you have to initiate meetings, and not often done, but it needs to be done more frequently, is you better align on what the practicalities, the particulars of a collaboration actually mean to all collaborating parties. And let me close with a very simple thought, which I call the Billy bookshelf fallacy. I mean, you're probably all familiar with a bookshelf that IKEA produces. And the notion is this one. I mean, we're all human beings, and we like to have this kind of a quick fix. We like to have a kind of, let's say, a plug and play manual that in 50 minutes, this bookshelf is full of new books. And similarly, we like to have these 3-month programs, 6-month programs, and we know exactly what we're working towards. But in building collaborations and making these innovation ecosystems, co-creation innovation bear fruit, the real tissue is this one. And relationships are messy, it's complicated, it's hard work. Sometimes it's sexy, and sometimes it's not glamorous. But if you deal with this, we know then the real promise of ecosystems, then that will deliver. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Sander. We promised at the beginning of this webinar that we wanted to give some practical input, and this was absolutely practical input. Now, I have a question, and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions from the audience. Now, I've been working with purchasing departments in large corporations for many years. With your approach, how do you look at the traditional way of purchasing, and what needs potentially to change?
Well, one of the simple and practical tips we can give is that purchasing should be part of this expectation alignment phase. This is a topic that has been much debated, is that the purchasing department, these are the people that dig their heels in. They don't like to collaborate, or they see all kinds of risks. Risk is literally on their forehead. But you should give them part of the ownership. So invite them to the table, bring them to the party, and in fact is that legal staff and procurement is an elementary part of these collaborations. Bring them to the party and involve them.
And to follow up on that, we also got a question about how you will handle equality and reciprocity in an ecosystem where the participants may have very different roles in, for example, a value chain. How would you go about doing that?
The best thing something that we learned is that you have to visualize. So if it's let's say a many-to-many collaboration with many intermittent parties along the chain, the best thing is to show them the big picture and then decompose it into the contributions of each individual collaborating member. And yes, it might be that some parts of the chain cannot contribute as much as the other ones. But maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's not an issue for collaborating parties. So show them the perspective, drill down, zoom in on the small contributing parts, and discuss it openly. So
another follow-up question to that. As the ecosystem works on, do you see the roles changing?
Well, we have experienced that in some cases the collaboration stops, but with good notion is that there was a missing competency, for example. There was a company or a competency or capability that needed to be added. So these collaborating parties, they invited another company to take part in the activities, and in fact, the collaboration then grew with one additional party, and that went out well. We also sometimes see is that one collaboration party says, "Well, I'm no longer committed to doing this. I don't see the benefits, or there are changes in my company, and I got a mission from my management to stop this collaboration because we'll change course, whatever it is. It's no longer within the strategy of the company." These things happen. So you cannot prevent this. As well, one of the not the Norwegian but the Danish former philosopher Kierkegaard once said, "You have to live forwards but understand backwards." Ecosystems and collaboration are living organisms, to paraphrase what Christian said. But the key thing here, I repeat what I said. I mean, we're human beings. The question is, how do you deal with this? Bring it to the table, discuss it, get a good understanding, and act.
Thank you very much, Sander. This was very insightful. And I know that Sander is a really nice guy, and he's also open to connections. So please contact him on LinkedIn, and maybe you can follow up with some more good discussions.
A pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you.
And then we're going to move on to the panel discussion. So now we've heard about ecosystems from a systemic perspective, organizations, organisms, and then Sander moved us down to talking about the individual element, we as humans. And that's where we're going to step over to the panel discussion, because now we're going to talk about the human element of how to make these ecosystems work. I had the pleasure of having three very different and very experienced people in the panel. First, we have Arne Petter Blix, Norwegian Superconnector. I love that title. He's a tech entrepreneur. He's been an executive with focus on deep tech for forever, 2-3 decades, well, long time. He has his fingers into a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries in many parts of the world. I've had the pleasure of meeting him and discussing some of these experiences, and I could probably listen for hours. Today, he's the CEO for Northern Lights Sensors, another company in the emerging tech domain. Well, look out for this company in the coming months and years. And well, as part of this, Arne is in fact living and breathing ecosystems. And then I would like to invite, of course, Jennifer Wessels back. You've already heard from her. And as the last part, the member of the panel discussion, we have Winifred Patricia Johansson, Scandinavia Meets Africa. Winifred. To me, she's Patricia. I'll probably say that a few times. Her name is Winifred. Is a crisis leadership researcher with a PhD. She's a cross-cultural business executive, as well as a mechanical engineer. She's currently the Senior Vice President Commercial for Quantafuel, which is a pioneering company working on chemical recycling of low-value plastic waste to petrochemical feedstock for reuse. Oh, that was a long explanation. She's currently also the chairwoman of the Danish part of Quantafuel, and she's on the board of trustees for Partner Africa. And I would like to add, she's also the first Black person on the board of trustees for Partner Africa. She was probably also the first Black woman on Norwegian grades at NTNU, which is a technical university where both Winifred and I have our Master of Science degrees from. Mind you, that was at the age of 18, about 2 years and 3 months after coming to Norway as a refugee from Uganda. That's pretty impressive. So it's really cool to have these three people on this panel discussion about actually people. So I'd like to start with the first question. And this first question will go to Arne first. So what are the fundamental values that have to be in place for an ecosystem to work? You are muted, or I can't hear you. No.
There we go. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I'm honored to be on this panel with Winifred and Jennifer. Thank you. Well, it's the question, because I've really enjoyed today's warm-up with Christian and Jennifer and Sander, and I think I can wholeheartedly put myself behind everything that was said. And now we should talk about how do we do it. The question really boils down to each individual and the mentality. Our values, yes, there has to be trust. I agree that there has to be communication. But in Norway, as an example, and I've seen cultures in many, many places around the world, Norway has a big problem, and I'll use that as an example to explain what I mean. Because one thing is we need to trust each other. We need to communicate well to understand the other person's motives. Because we have competition, we have cooperation, competition, all that stuff. But unless I really understand what you want out of it, how can I really trust you? And the only way I can figure that out is to communicate with you. The other part is the lack of culture, the bad culture, the negative culture. And this is where we need to learn something in Norway. And I think Jennifer knows exactly what I'm talking about, because in the Bay Area, and I'm sure also, Winifred, you've seen this where you're from, and I've seen it when I lived in Manila. And I interact today on a daily basis with China, with Japan, and with India, as well as the US. And the mindsets are so different. But in Norway, yeah, we're competitive, but we wouldn't mind if you failed a bit, because then I don't have to try so hard. We are not so good at celebrating other people's success. We are better at gloating. And gloating is not conducive for giving and offering in an ecosystem. So I believe it's the mentality and it's the culture. And that's where we need to work. And that's about working with our own minds and helping people understand that you have to give to receive. You have to pay forward. And you have to trust yourself enough to share first. And then hopefully someone will return the gift. And this is old. This is from the Bible. This is from a lot of different old knowledge. And people have just forgotten this.
I so agree with you, Arne. I've got to jump in. And I mean, that really leads to when I say we select open, committed, brave people. It's people that really, truly are open, not just saying it because they think it's a cool thing to do. And they're driven and they're committed to drive something and achieve something bigger than themselves. Mm-hmm. I find that in Silicon Valley, there's yes, I mean, everywhere you turn, people are competing, my software company versus yours, but we're all working towards a bigger goal to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. And so keeping that bigger perspective can get away from a little bit of that gloating of mine's better than yours or vice versa. I mean, maybe it's Norway is too small that creates some of that.
Winifred, you've been studying crisis leadership and how humans create problems or solve problems. What do you think about the fundamental values that have to be in place for an ecosystem to work?
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations about trust. And as a scholar, I think let's break it down a little. What really is trust? And I'm very lucky to have one of the world's best trust researchers as one of my professors, Anna Cristina Costa. And from a lot of her work, if I look at the simplest definition of trust, trust is the willingness to accept vulnerability. It's a willingness to accept vulnerability based on an expectation of a positive outcome. Okay, I'm from Uganda. I'm a daughter of the Nile. So let me take this down a notch back to the organism. The buffalo and the oxpecker. The oxpecker is that bird that's always on the buffalo, picking its skin. Or let's get down to the water. The Nile crocodile. And that little Egyptian bird that's always in its mouth. That's about trust. The only reason that bird goes into a crocodile's mouth to clean its teeth, it's because it knows that the crocodile's not going to smack shut its jaws and close it in. And the only reason the oxpecker can go into the nostril of a buffalo to pick up a tick is because the buffalo trusts that this oxpecker is not going to choke it to death. So trust is a very dynamic, behavior. We start with that willingness to take a risk. Again, it's a risk taking, but it's a cyclic event really. Trust could start with initial trust, which is hi, I trust you, I just met you, I don't really have much information about you, but I'm going to give you a chance, right? Which is great. Or trust could be, I'm not really going to put my foot forward until I know more about you and I'm willing to let go and put down my guards. That is also another step of it. But it's going to go in a loop. Whichever way it starts, your own response, your own behavior dictates how it builds your perceived trustworthiness. So it is in giving that you receive. So are you giving trust? Are you giving the vibrations that you are trustworthy? And again, what is trustworthiness? And what is it that makes people trust? Some people have a naturally high propensity to trust others, others don't. But again, this propensity, there is a science behind it, a lot of research, and it boils down to we have an expectation of the ability. If you're putting somebody, if Jennifer's putting somebody on her team in a group, she's expecting that this particular person has an ability and also integrity to act within the core values there. Yeah, and without that integrity, if that is pulverized, there will not be any trust. And then there has to be a benevolence, the willingness that we want others to succeed. And that's what Anna Blix brings here, that, we may not want others to succeed because then, we don't have to try very hard. But for real trust, we need to have that willingness to want to see others to succeed. And then we have some components of trust that we need to look at. I would say there's rational trust. You trust the figures, you trust the EBITDA, you trust the return of investment, you trust the accountants. And then there is the cognitive trust as humans. And again, I want to bring this back to the core of the presentation today, the human experience. We as humans, what is cognitive trust? Yeah, we're looking at the competence, the reliability of a person, the dependability of a person. And that's the dependability that you're building. It's your trust capital. Are you banking trust capital or you are faking trust capital? And how is that capital coming in? What is it you're communicating? There's one thing about what you're saying and what the rest of your communication is emitting, whether it's your body language or how you act around others. Because again, communication is only 20% verbal, the rest really is non-verbal. So is your communication, when you're sitting in this forum, when you're working with others, is it sending that message that I'm dependable, I'm reliable, I wish you well? Because if those are missing, then there is no element that you can build on fundamental trust. You'll be like the onion. You're working on the outer layers of what you think is trust, but the core issues remain, you're well guarded and you're afraid of the tears. You won't peel the onion. Anna, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I'd like to offer two observations here. One, I've taken trust for granted since I was 19, 20 years old. I spent in the period between I was 18 to 26 in the Navy, and I have had the pleasure of being more than 1,000 days inside of a machine, which is called a submarine. And the trust is a question every day. I mean, it's a question of life and death. It's a binary thing. That this exercise most people have not, and I see it again and again when I enter businesses, teams, new friend circles. The trust game. People think they understand what trust is. People think they say they trust, etc. But it takes time. It takes a long time to make old friends, and it takes and it's an exercise. But if you have that muscle, if you have exercised that muscle, and you can very quickly, with very, very few words, and recognize if the other person understands the car, which we call trust, and can drive that car, the vehicle trust. And if you understand the boundaries, of course it's integrity, of course it's coherence. It's honesty, brutal honesty, even though it sometimes hurts. But I was working very hard during the crypto crazy blockchain time, and where scam is and was abundant. And the real way of de-risking a relation that you don't know who is, you have to communicate and you have to ask really, really tough questions and listen extremely attentively to the answers that you get, and you're seeking for patterns and you're seeking for incongruences. And this is an exercise that people need to train on. It's something that is what can I say? It's something that it's a muscle that you have to exercise a lot, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be humble about the other person also needing to trust you. And that's back to the culture and your attitude towards the exercise. And that's what you said, the power of peers, Jennifer. That you put people that probably have a reason for, or possibly could match, and then you see if they can possibly create trust between each other, and then magic can happen. But the last part, and I'll finish in a moment, is you have to understand the motives, the drivers, the incentives behind the other person. Why are you here? And what do you want out of this? And can I trust that part? Because then I can sit there with a competitor at the other side of the table, no problem. As long as I understand the exercise, the purpose of the exercise, and sort of the rules of the game.
Well,
right. So then we had the.
I wanted to add something about that, and that is trust within the social context. And I want to stir the soup a little here. We're living in very different social contexts. The world has changed, and what we knew as boundaries before are no longer there. And thanks to technology, we are working much faster across cultures, across national borders, across language borders, religious borders, and everything happens within a social context. And there is that sense making that we need to bring in, to understand each other's social worlds, because there is no longer one truth. What is true and right in one cultural perspective is not necessarily true and right in another cultural perspective. So as we build a global organism, we need to be mindful of this of these issues, and the sense making of all of us pretty much is built on our lived experience, our worlds, our history, our culture, our upbringing, our education, our all the spices and all the ingredients that are in this stew that make who we are, and we need a bit of humility to be able to take that in, and in building ecosystems, I see oftentimes, during negotiations, let's say looking at contractual negotiations, you have the arrogance of the big. I'm big, I'm powerful, my organization's huge, you've got 100,000 employees, you're from a little organization. And that may work for a while, but in the long run, it is not likely to work. And again, going back to the savannah, a mouse can kill an elephant. All it has to do is go into the elephant's trunk, cause enough irritation, and the elephant is going to crush its own trunk from it, trying to scratch it. And that's a small disruption. The little guy who's coming on board is able to disrupt the elephant in understanding the vulnerability of the elephant.
I'll remember that image in my head. Jennifer.
Yes. I completely agree with everything that's been said, and I think to echo the concept of trust, it starts with having a common goal. I mean, if you have a common goal, you can get over a lot of small elements. It also means being upfront and clear of what that goal is. That's being vulnerable, sharing what you're trying to achieve, and coming willing to not only share the positives, but share the negatives.
Yes.
And what we've seen is that makes for a really quick path to trust by selecting people that have those elements.
Mm-hmm.
So with everything that now has been said about trust in particular, but also about communication, what do you think that current leaders should focus on changing to enable ecosystems to a larger extent than what they're currently doing?
Well, I can start with that. And in management school, and when we look at a lot of the leaders today, the CEOs, it's very heavy loaded with finance education. At least in Norway, if you're not from BI or from NH, from Norges Handelshøyskole, you're an underdog there. But when you look at how organizations fail. Taking it to the crisis context where I am doing research, it is never because the CEO had bad financial skills. It's very rare. It usually boils down to the non-technical skills, the social cognitive skills that are rarely taught and underappreciated. And if I can break down this non-technical skill sets, looking at communication, we've already talked about the importance of communication and how only 20% of it is really verbal, the rest is non-verbal. And then you're communicating across boundaries, across context, across social worlds. And it could be as simple, Ellen and I had a discussion the other day about a video presentation. And in that presentation, somebody's showing their feet. While it's natural in one context, it's an insult in another context to show somebody your feet, So what is your communication in that communication? Situational awareness. We are living in a very fast-paced world where what is fact and what is real 5 minutes ago is no longer real now. If we look at it in the COVID perspective, the exponential growth of this pandemic, the information sharing has been incredible. And again, seething what's right, what's wrong, what's news, what's fake news, what is relevant, what is irrelevant. So as a leader today, you're really going to need to up your skills in understanding your situational awareness. You're going to have to up your skills in sorting a lot of data and sorting what is right from what you can work with. You have to make decisions, timely decisions. And you cannot expect that you're going to be making decisions based on 100% truth. There's not going to be that, because the situational awareness keeps on changing, and decision making is still going to be very important. We are seeing fatigue coming on board because the world is fast-paced, it's changing. There's organizational fatigue, there's individual fatigue, there is societal fatigue. I mean, we're all getting tired of social distancing, if I should bring that as an example, wearing them up. That is an organizational or societal fatigue. But we need to learn to work with that, to conform to that, to learn how to still put one foot in front of the other. So these are the kind of skills that we see that are really important, but they're not taught, unfortunately. And teamwork, of course. Teamwork, we are in a transboundary world. The boundaries of what was a country or what was a region, what was a continent, doesn't really matter. If you look at this pandemic, it doesn't matter anymore. So we need to learn how to work across all that and team up and build trust in the teams, cross-cultural, cross-boundary, cross-national, cross-legislative. And without that inter-teams and multi-teams and multi-organization and multinational trust building, we are not in a good place.
Jennifer first and then Anna.
I agree 100%, Winifred. And from my perspective, I would say what a leader should do, and a leader can be the CEO or a leader can be the project manager, a leader of an initiative. The leader needs to start with themselves.
Yes.
Because an organization and a company is made up of people. And so each of us need to go inside. Yes. And really get to know ourselves and our purpose. Mm-hmm. And be clear on what do I want to achieve? What are the opportunities available to me that I can see now? Mm-hmm. What could be possible as the world continues to change? Mm-hmm. It starts with embracing that the future is going to be different, recognizing what each person's purpose is, what their goals, their challenges. And then from that, you start with a place of confidence. Mm-hmm. You're no longer scared and hiding. You're no longer worried about what he's going to do and is it going to be better. because you know what you're trying to do, you know who you are, and you have the confidence then to be able to collaborate, build trust, and move forward.
Arne?
Well, yeah, I'm sighing because you're putting weights on my shoulder and in my backpack, because I'm doing this right now as the CEO of an emerging company, and we have foreign owners of a completely different culture than Norway. We have extreme technology challenges. We have extreme diversity in the board that I have not met in person yet, because I started this job 1st of June. And I've only been hired during excruciating vetting during COVID over video. There are so many moving parts. I had a board meeting yesterday I can't even explain to you. And the only thing I can do, this is the lesson, I can try to be myself, try to be genuine, brutally honest, even though I can see it's not always popular what I'm saying, because if I stop talking, the risk increases. And I think you've made a really good point there, you see, Winifred, because yeah, there's fake news, there's real news. And there's Sarah I've been watching the chat here, and she asked a question, and we have gone from a human-centric world to a document-centric world where it's quantitative. We have to go back to the human stuff. It's more difficult. It's more on the intuitive side, and it's more on the experience side. You can't teach all of this in school. When I look at talents, I look at their ability to learn, how flexible their learning muscle and change muscle is, not what they necessarily know right now. And then you're back to the old stuff of hire for attitude, train for skills. Yes, but I believe we have to go back to more of the human channel. And that's the more difficult skills to learn, and it's more and it's definitely not the AI skills. It's the hard school of learning, the hard way of experience. And then later on, when trust is there, you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. You can listen to other people's mistake and go from there. And that takes an enormous amount of trust. And there's no way I can scale this company without being able to delegate. And you can't delegate without trust. There's no growth without trust. So we really have, and this fake news, real news world that we are living in, alternative facts, it's poison. Because it makes it so much harder to build that into human trust, and that's where we need to have leaders, organizations, board members, and investors go back and understand that that's what really matters. And I hope and believe that was what they vetted in me when they put me in this job, and I try to own up to it every day, and that's hard. But and it takes to be humble, but it also takes sometimes to just be very honest, even though it's not necessarily always humble. But you have to dare to do that, venture to do that, and I think business school and ecosystems, they should talk more about how do we bring. Well, three simple concepts, and I'll stop with that. And people can only remember three things, you know. So the mantra I have is to keep a clear, sometimes cold mind, a warm heart, and clean hands. Those three things. That's my mantra to you, to my employees, to everyone. If you have clean hands, warm heart, and a clear mind, you'll go far.
That sounds like a very sound advice. I would like to change the direction of the discussion a little bit, but stay with you, Anna, because sometimes the ecosystems, they just don't work. When should you get out, and then what? Do you want to?
Well, yeah, I can start right now. I'm taking, bringing new money, etc., into an existing ecosystem in Norway and the Nordics. And in Norway, we have a wonderful word called medspiller, which is a co-player. It's someone you play with, not against. And I believe that my success, my company's success, your success, anyone's success in the infinite future, as the future gets more complex across culture lines, political, geopolitical lines, trust lines, fake news, real news, all of this craziness, because we are now more than double the amount of people on the planet than when I was born. The only way to measure success in the future is going to be your ability to partner and exist and coexist in an ecosystem, because nobody can never do everything by themselves anymore. You're going to depend upon how these things mesh, how they coexist. And coexistence like this, when you come into an ecosystem. So I just had this meeting last week, and I said, I'm come in peace. We might in 5 or 10 years end up as competitors. I don't know, impossible, but that's not my intention. My intention is to contribute, to be a medspiller, to be a co-player in an ecosystem and contribute to it. And hopefully you see the world the same as I do, as we do, and then we can grow the ecosystem. The first reply was no. Oh yeah, because we haven't been able to build the trust channel yet, and the people I bring in here are pretty powerful and big. That's scary, very scary. And and so we have to take some time, build that trust, and then they will. So I ended the discussion, said, well, maybe now, but can we leave the door half open, and then resume the conversation maybe in a couple of months' time? Yeah. So if it doesn't work the first time, continue to try, and well, then maybe you'll have to create a different cluster if it's completely impossible.
Jennifer.
Thank you for sharing that example, Anna, because it really brings to me one of the biggest reasons why people fail in ecosystems often is fear. They're afraid. They're afraid that if they will share, someone will take advantage of their vulnerability. They're afraid they will be pushed and held accountable to do something that they're really not comfortable with. So if an ecosystem is not working for you, I would suggest before you run away from it, because that's our tendency when we have fear, is to run away. Encourage yourself to stay there a little bit longer, go inside, and understand what is causing me to want to get out. Where is that fear coming from? And address that. Then rethink, is this the right ecosystem for me, or should I move to a different one?
Winifred.
Well, I agree with both Anna and Jennifer. I really like your mantra. My mantra is you win with people. And as Jennifer said, fear is a very, very strong factor in the walls that we build around us, in this onion layered principle as to who you can let into which layer. And going back to the research on trust, where you do not have this initial trust, you need to work it a bit longer to build that. And that is when you need to go from the cognitive trust to the affective trust, which is it's a bit more of an emotional involvement. When I work with startups and I look at their products, I'm always asking, what is the human experience of your product or service? And that human experience is what drives the decisions we make. A lot of times we think that we make decisions based on rationality, but more and more actually humans, we are not rational. We are emotional beings that are making decisions based on our historicality, based on what it is we are carrying in our bag. So this affective trust is about building a genuine case of concern, and it's that belief that you want to build a reciprocal trust, and that is acknowledging where this person is coming from. Maybe they've had bad experiences in the past that now cloud who they want to let into their ecosystem. And sometimes what is important is to understand that historicality and then decide based on this knowledge. It's live and let live, not live and let die. I may not want to enter this ecosystem, maybe not for now. I will find another. But that understanding helps you in future collaboration or even competition. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to, because then you understand the context of their social world. If you are selling, Jennifer had the example about transportation, whether it's bus or train or plane, the human experience really is about getting from A to B, and how comfortable is it for me? Why would I choose to?
Oh. Who froze? Winifred froze.
Uh-oh.
You take the human back into the center of your product development or your service development or your leadership or your decision making to what drives this person. What is it in their bag? And that is then the core of their decision making. And then choose. And then you choose a path. You don't always have to, you could be a bird. You don't have to be a fish. So you don't have to be in the water if you don't want to be in the water. Or you realize this water is, this is muddy water. I don't want to be in it. I want to be in fresh water. Acknowledge it, accept it, and then you move. But then you're making your decision based on that experience.
Anna, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just looping back to what leaders can do and how do we facilitate, motivate, incentivize people to invest in ecosystems. And this is back to actually Christian's presentation as well. What are the core components, the enzymes, if you like, or the catalysts, to use his language, that can help accelerate and grow the ecosystem. And I think in the Nordics, at least, the awareness and the people don't value the ecosystem thinking so much. In the shipping industry, we've had, I used to come from the shipping industry first. That was my first industry. We call it shipping cluster. Now there are many clusters, and people are starting to understand that this makes sense, but I don't think they have analyzed it well enough. Everyone's had the opinion that Silicon Valley has done something unique with regards to certain type of technology, certain areas, and we're doing this more in Norway, but I think we need to break it down even further. What are the enzymes? What are the catalysts? And that's where I believe Power of Peers, like Jennifer mentioned, is a structured initiative. Mm-hmm. I have myself been a member of a community within the Global Equity Organization, and everyone who are working with equity-based incentives, accounting, valuation, and disclosure related to share-based payment. And that community is very much alive, and it's a limited set of people, and they have been thriving for at least 20 years, and it's the same people. They move around in different jobs, and they cooperate, and there are two, competition and cooperation. Many ways of, so they understand the value and that things change, jobs change, but you have to have a beehive that is thriving. And this is what I think is a mentality change that is needed.
In Silicon Valley, we often say the companies and the technologies evolve. The people remain here and need to evolve as a community.
Yes, exactly.
So
and that's the mentality, that's the culture that we need to tweak a bit, kick.
I have now time is passing quickly when you're having fun. So we have a few more minutes. I see we have received a couple of questions. So one question, what does it take to create trust in this new social context, which involves distance and technology, and a context in which verbal does not bring all the usual information that we used to rely on? Who wants to go?
Okay, I'll jump in. I have a lot of my meetings in my calendar. When I talk to people, I say, "Can we have a mutual discovery meeting?" And that's really what it is. It's a mutual discovery meeting where each person or around the table talks about what they do, and nothing comes from a closed hand. You have to open up. So you have to share, you have to talk about what you do. And if you can't talk about what you do for half an hour without sharing secrets, you don't have much to show for in the first place. But then you talk about, this is what I'd like to do, this is what I can offer, and this is what I'm looking for, sort of. That's a mutual discovery. And then you can, if people who don't know each other at all, but who are professionals, who are working in a certain business, then you can see if they match, and then you start to understand the motives, and then you start building trust.
Jennifer.
I love that example, and I think it really starts with when you know who you are and what you're trying to achieve, and you reach out to or invited to a conversation with somebody who you believe has a common purpose. Come into it recognizing there can be some commonality to help each of us get to what we want to achieve. You start with a good base. And it's been interesting during the pandemic, being in Norway versus Silicon Valley, where I also have a home, to observe in this culture where trust is such an important aspect of the Norwegian culture, to observe the concerns about how I can build trust, how I can have meetings, how I can engage people in a digital world versus being in person. In Silicon Valley, for the last 5 to 10 years, 90 to 95% of my work and that of my colleagues is done remotely. Home offices are in every house in Silicon Valley. The commute and the traffic and the impact on the environment makes going into an office an unusual experience from our viewpoint. So we've done this for years. This is nothing unusual. And it comes, I think, from that common purpose, clear communication, and coming in with a recognition of, I know what I'm trying to achieve, and I'm not afraid of what he or she is going to do or take or give to help me get there. You may
Arne?
Well, you mentioned Tandberg, and my sister was one of the earliest Tandbergese, Tandbergianer, as we called them, and they were convinced that the world would change rapidly and much faster because of video conferencing, and I always said, well, it works if you have met first in person.
And we never believed that in Tandberg, by the way. We always shook our head saying, well.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're in a paradigm where we have to do the first step digitally. And that's a totally different muscle.
Yeah.
It's a totally different skill and a totally different exercise. It takes, but human beings are extremely adaptable. And I'm confident we will do it. If you were able to do it in Silicon Valley, we can do it here. But you do have the opportunity to actually go and meet someone at the coffee shop pretty quick. Now, I don't have the opportunity to go across the world between February this year and today and meet my owners. But I'm spending their money. And I can assure you, it's not the easiest exercise in the world. It woke me up 4 a.m. this morning because my mind was racing about yesterday's board meeting and how can we get these puzzles to fit, because we haven't had that beer, we haven't had that dinner, we haven't looked each other in the white eye and all that sort of thing, and that's a new exercise for all of us.
Winifred.
Well, digital meetings have their shortcomings, but I think really at the end of the day, it's what we have. And you can be genuine digitally as well, because in communication with others, really, when you are giving yourself in that conversation, like we are online now, you can at least perceive part of my body language. You can hear my voice, and that gives you something as well, if I'm engaged or disengaged. Now, we may not be able to meet face to face, but we can still have that human experience, though human digital, where we are fully engaged with each other. And I would encourage more video calls or voice calls than just text messaging and emails. You know, bring a bit more of the human senses into this mix, not just the sense of sight and reading and cognition, but that experience that is. I've heard people who have had meals together online. I haven't done that yet, although I'm a foodie. It's something I'm yet to do. But in my other world, in my analog world, I like to eat with people as a means to get to know them. And if we go back to what Kristen was talking about, the early organisms and how the mind works, in our reptilian mind, feeding is one of the core principles that are in there. But the act of sharing food is also an act of dispersing fear, because if food was a scarce resource, me sharing food with you means I invite you into my social world, into my space. And so I put down one layer of fear.
Exactly.
And that's why it's very important to eat with people. I think a lot of people do it unconsciously, but it's something that's in our reptilian mind. It is a bonding mission.
Yes.
I have one more question, and it goes to Winifred before we close off. And that is, when shit hits the fan and the ecosystem for some reason breaks down, mm-hmm. and you have a conflict on your hands, mm-hmm. what would you recommend that mm-hmm. we do, those who are part of an ecosystem every day?
Well, I have my principle of live and let live. I think the human instinct is, when things are not working, is to break it up, you know. But in the situations that I have witnessed, where things have not worked in one case, does not mean it will indefinitely not work. So try to understand why it has not worked in this particular time frame, and build that knowledge as a base to part amicably. You know, like Shakespeare would say, this parting was well made. So it's about having a beautiful divorce. What we understood, what we did not agree on, and fully acknowledge at this point we are not moving in the same direction. At this point, I'm a fish and you're a bird. And that does not mean you're bad and I'm bad. It just means that we are bringing two universes into a forced communion where they do not belong. So again, going back to what we talked about, it is trust to acknowledge that this has failed, trust to see the human in this perspective, and then the leadership to make that decision. A lot of times, an ecosystem is failing, a system is failing, but there's a fear of decision making. So you stay in this situation much longer than you need to. So courage to make the decision, rational decision, before it's gone to a point where a human relationship is irreparable. So live and let live. and try to get this experience to a point where we cannot work together now. But I may be a penguin, I may be a bird, but I'm still in the water and I will come back. So always leave that opportunity to be able to collaborate later. Don't blow up the planet.
Right. So that's a good ending comment. Don't blow up the planet if the ecosystem doesn't work. We have only 4 minutes left. So first of all, I would like to thank you three, Anna, Winifred, and Jennifer, very much for a very good panel discussion. I really enjoyed it. I was trying to keep track of everything here. And I hope our audience also has appreciated it. And again, I'm sure that these wonderful people will be happy to connect on LinkedIn and continue the discussion over video, over a coffee, lunch, bonfire, whatever. I also received a question about resources to read up on ecosystems. So we will collect some input from the participants and the keynotes of today. And then, of course, also feel free to ask them directly. Thank you very much to our audience, of course, and to our keynotes and to our panel participants. It's been great. Thank you for contributing with all your insight. And should we slide the analog way?
Nice.
Thank you, Elin. As the organizer of this event, together with my partner, Board Øvrebro in Norway, you build something, a kind of a platform, and you get the people together, as discussed, a mini ecosystem for a moment in time. And then you hope it flies off, people take it away. And that's really the feeling I have. Both the speakers at the start, the interaction with all the participants in the Q&A, and you as panelists over here. It has been an amazing experience. I'm shaking over here with the content you delivered together. And I'm just sit with a fantastic feeling over here, what you were able to deliver on this platform to the viewers and also the people who in the future will see this video on YouTube or on other occasions. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for organizing. Very, very good to hear other like-minded, open, committed, brave people working together.
So let's get together and create new ecosystems. And have a great day.
Thank you for having me on the panel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Winifred. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's been great. Let's meet and eat.
Yeah,
Let's meet.
look forward to it.
Meet and eat.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.